Greetings everyone. Today I will be discussing reframing value in a circular economy through the MMPA framework. My name is Manila Dooyeweerd and I am from Spiral Lab, Windesheim University of Applied Sciences in the Netherlands. In this presentation, I want to highlight that the way we define value has deep social, cultural and ecological consequences, and if we want a truly circular economy, we must rethink what we mean by value. The main points in these presentations are the concept of value in the circular economy, the systemic nature of value, the MMPA to reframe value, a short introduction, and to end implication for policy and practice. Value in the circular economy. Well, when we talk about value in the circular economy, we move beyond the idea of profit alone. Value here means keeping products and materials in use for as long as possible through reuse, repair and recycling, so that nothing is wasted. The European Parliament frames it as reducing waste and keeping resources in the economy as long as possible. The focus is thus on creating environmental value by reducing resource extraction, social value by generating new jobs and skills, and material value by preserving resources within the system. This sounds really promising, but the real question is, value for whom? The current approach often emphasizes economic efficiency, but doesn't always capture the wider human, cultural, or ecological dimensions of value. What do we really mean by value in the circular economy? The 10R ladders, from the refuse and rethink to recycle and recover, show us that value is, or at least should be, more than profit. Each strategy extends product life, saves the resources, creates jobs, and preserves materials. Together, they highlight economic, social, and environmental value working hand in hand. There are but contradictions and paradox in this. A striking example of this paradox can be seen in the so-called recycling of electronics in West Africa. Europe exports millions of tons of used electronics each year, claiming this is part of circular economy strategies. In reality, much of this material arrives broken and unusable, so informal workers, often children, are forced to extract metals by burning components, releasing toxic fumes. So while European nations retain the economic benefits, the environmental and health costs are externalized to vulnerable communities. This highlights that the way we assign value can reproduce injustice rather than resolve it. So this raises a critical question. Does the circular economy truly work if it shifts risks to vulnerable communities? Real value in circularity must include not only resource efficiency, but also fairness and responsibility. Waste is never neutral, but it can be seen as a technique of power that creates social and ecological injustice, deeply tied to power relations. The ways materials become waste and where it ends up are shaped by histories of colonialism. It displaces harm onto certain geographies and communities, affecting not just resources but also identity, ancestry and livelihood of indigenous people, externalizing environmental and health costs to marginalized communities. This forces us to ask, whose values are embedded in the circular economy? To provide an answer to the previous question, the aspectual framework becomes important. Instead of locating value in either the acting subject, the object, or the relation between them, Herman Dooyeweerd suggests that value lies in the aspects that make subject, object, and their relationship possible. In this way, value is not just economic, aesthetic, social, ethical, spiritual, or ecological. By recognizing these different modalities of value, we can better understand the systemic nature of circular economy decisions. Dooyeweerd asserted that reality is created by a supratemporal order and experienced by human beings within 15 different and interconnected modalities in a given not causal succession. He calls it order. Modalities go from numerical to cradle to form a spectrum of value. In Dooyeweerd philosophy, value resides in the meaning of each modality. that allow analogical and subject-object correlations. Analogical relations are what relate modalities in the given succession, which is the picture on the left in this slide. Subject-object relation overcome duality, but we will see it in the next slide. So values are systemic and multifaceted, and they are not dualistic. This aspectual framework helps us understand the diverse ways in which value is created and retained. As said in the previous slide, the subject-object relation is the bridge to non-duality. Beings, including processes, can be subject in certain modalities and objects in others. This all at the same time, as we experience reality within the 15 modalities in a simultaneous way. An example to explain this relation is the tree. A tree is subject in the numerical, spatial, kinematics, physical, biotic modalities. It means that within these modalities, a tree has its qualifying functions applying to it in a subjective way, because it has a size, it is made of a certain material, it is alive. A tree is an object in other functions, from the sensitive to the cradle, because its qualifying functions do not apply to it in a subjective way, but is given to it by the subject of these modalities. For example, a tree is an object in the economic modality as it can have a price, in the sensitive as it can be important to someone, in the aesthetic as it can be beautiful or not, according to someone, and so on. The painting is different from the tree, as it is an artwork. It is made by human beings, and although it has subjective qualifying functions in the physical modality, because it is made of materials like colors and chemical compounds and so on, its function relies in the aesthetic modality, as it is an artistic piece. This is the example of artifacts. What we cannot find in nature has compound subject-object qualifying functions. So a painting has a value related to the materials it is made of, but for the author or for who looks at it, the value resides primarily in the aesthetic modality. Of course, the economic modality plays also a relevant role, like all others. The subject-object relation is made possible and valuable by the analogical succession of modality, which is the analogical succession of meanings and value. This relationship is crucial in understanding how value is perceived and assigned in different contexts. Decolonizing value in the circular economy involves reshaping the way we assign value to things. And this is where the MMPA can help. The MMPA is a newly developed framework structured on the extension of the analogical relation within a total of 14 layers of context. A context is the area that is immediately defined by analogical relations. The closer the modalities, the smaller the main context and the stronger the influence between them. MMPA provides a comprehensive approach to what is value in a systemic and multidimensional perspective. It allows us to reshape the way we assign value by embedding multiple dimensions, cultural, social, ecological, and temporal, into our evaluation of circular practices. Instead of assuming a universal definition of value, we acknowledge that different communities and cultures may ground their plans in different languages, symbols, and relationships to the environment. This is a shift from imposing one model to recognizing plurality. Let's now analyze the concept of circular economy by using the MMPA. First step is to contextualize it. It means to pick the modality that closely define this compound concept. I picked the physical and the economic modalities. The physical is related to resources and the economic to the frugal allocation of resources. They meet in the analogical relation plans for allocation of resources that is anchored to the interconnection between the analytical and the formative modalities. This means that plans for the allocation of resources, the analogical relation between physical and economic, is rooted in the logical control and power. The formative is the model representing the cultural evolution through time. Power resides in it, especially in its connection with the logical sphere of human being. It also is connected to Eichen time, which is the subjective time. It means that plans to allocate physical resources in an economy that is aimed at reducing waste are shaped by our subjective perspective that is rooted in culture. That is why we fall into colonial behaviors very easily. If we look closer at the two main modalities, the physical and the economic, we can see that inside the defined area or context, there are two strong analogical relations. Balance between physical resources and biodiversity, and on the other side, next to the economic modality, human resources as workforce. These two analogical relations are key and strong as immediately close to the main modalities. Again, it means that in planning to allocate resources in a way that reduces waste, we can do that by considering the impact on nature of distraction of resources. But we also need to consider not only the balance between resources and biodiversity, but also human resources. It can be done if there is equality. If we think about the situation of the e-waste in West Africa, we see that something is missing there in those plans. As we have seen in the previous slide, the matrix highlights some key aspects. The first key aspect is that the frugal allocation of resources, that would include natural and human resources, has to consider the social meaning of the physical natural environment in accordance with the cycles of life, as to be respectful of the human connection with resources and the balance between resources and biodiversity. Plans pointing to an economy that reduces waste and excess, aiming at supporting individual and social well-being, has to respect and balance workforce distribution. The allocation plan is the result of logical and formative control rooted in culture and subjectivity that will define the plan itself. Due to different cultural temporal formative roots, plans will be grounded on different languages and symbols, as well as meaning of the environment. The logical and formative control is a temporal formative evolution grounded in land, as a continuous motion of simultaneous change according to resource, nature cycles, and human evolution. So to say that valuable circular business models take into account the social and individual meaning of resources. They use technical language that is respectful of cultures and plan for resources regeneration in accordance with natural cycles. So what does this mean in practice? It means that designing business models that go beyond efficiency and profit to respect the cycles of nature, to reduce excess, to ensure well-being and balance human labor with ecological integrity is what we really need. Circularity then becomes not just about resource recovery, but about justice, meaning, and resilience. This requires humility, recognizing that value is not universal, but it has deep cultural roots in land, as it's defined by Gregson and Krang. The case of the e-waste in West Africa is an highlighting example. The questions arising by using the MMPA indicate that circular business models should at least provide an answer to them before they are said to be ready for action. To conclude, reframing value in the circular economy means asking deeper questions about who benefits, who bears the cost, and how cultural and ecological meanings are respected. By using systemic and decolonial approaches like MMPA, we can move from a narrow economic focus to a richer, more just vision of circularity. Thank you all.